a bit of an overview what we're going to cover. We're going to cover about what is a project, and why is a project initiated. We're going to talk about what is project management, and critical project management skills. We're going to talk about project lifecycle and key project tasks. We're going to go into the details to give you an idea, like I said, for you to make a decision on whether this is something for you to consider and take it for as a career. Let's go into a bit of a definition of the project. Project is a temporary endeavor, something that you do for a period of time, and it gives you, and you create a product which is unique, which is something which has not been done before. It could be a service or a product or an objective. So how we look at it from project management point of view, we say that a project has a definite start and an end. And what does that mean? So let's dig deep little bit into it. Temporary means the project has a start date and it has an end date. What it also means is that it temporary does not mean it will be for a short duration. What it means is the team will be engaged, that will be doing a project, will be engaged for a period of time, and then those teams will be released. So one thing to consider in terms of project management is that project does not mean short. Temporary does not mean short. It just means that it is for a definite time and period. The other thing is unique. We talked about unique. We call project unique because we, as part of the project, we don't know what we are exactly delivering. We haven't done that before. So based on the requirements and the scope of the project, what we do is we look into the requirements and say, okay, this is what we need to deliver, and you make a plan, you come up with an approach to deliver that project. So most of the projects, whether we are infrastructure based or software IT based or any specific field, so anything you talk about it, which is something not done before. So that's why it is called unique. The other thing is the projects brings change. So whenever you have a project, it is basically either facilitating a change within your business, within your environment, or as a journal globally. So let me give you an idea. Is business transformation. So a lot of organizations, especially because of this COVID issue, are going through the business transformation. The whole mode of operation has changed. So a lot of organizations are coming up with online delivery. This is one example where the face-to-face delivery is difficult. So a lot of organizations are initiating a project to set up their online facilities for people to work remotely. So that's the change. So any project that does is either facilitating a change or brings about a change. Secondly, for the last one, the fourth one, for a project, any project that organization do, it needs to have some sort of a business value creation. Let me give you an example of it. So let's take an example of infrastructure project. So like railway lines. When you build a railway line, the projects, the organization, government around the world, when they build infrastructure projects, what they do is that they do it for the benefit of the community. So it is for the benefit of the community. It's bringing some business value creation. It's enabling business to develop some benefit for the community, or even for a wider public. And now benefits could be tangible, or benefit could be intangible. So tangible benefit could be monetary assets, fixtures, access tools, or organization do projects to increase their market share. Intangible benefits would be, goodwill, brand value, and so on and so forth. So in general, projects, just to summarize, has a definite start and end date, usually temporary. Teams will work on a project and then they're released. Creates a unique product or a feature, brings a change, and usually have some sort of a business value for the organization that's doing it. Okay, so that brings us to a question: why are projects initiated? Why do we do projects? So projects are a response to the lot of reasons. So one of them is a market demand. give you an example of COVID-19 as the best example. So, like I said, a lot of organizations are going through a lot of business transformation. So that's a market demand. The market doesn't want face-to-face interaction, so organizations are going online. COVID-19 vaccine for COVID-19 is another example. A vaccine is required. A lot of countries around the world are going through developing a vaccine. So they have initiated projects to respond to the market demand. The other thing is strategic business needs, and we can take this as an organization that needs to capture market in the world, or trying to build a brand. They would come up with a product that would give them an edge over their competitors. So that could be a strategic business need. There could be a customer request. You may have a customer coming up to you, say, okay, we need that kind of a product. So organizations start projects in response to a customer need. There could be a technological change. Let's take an example of the pretty much rapid changes in our mobile communication. So if you notice that, about 15-20 years back, phone was a mode for communication for basically a telephone only. Now it's our smart devices, pretty much everything. It's not only phone, it's our internet. It's pretty much our life is in that phone now. So that is what kind of a technology change has brought in. So a lot of organization has integrated and come up with the apps that respond to that technological change, so that their business can run on that. So that's another thing. Social and environmental need is another reason the project can be initiated. Greenhouse effect is a very good example. A lot of countries around the world are very conscious of greenhouse effect and are implementing a lot of projects across the globe are being implemented to respond to carbon emission. So that's something. And then we have regulatory and legal requirements. So these, just to give you guys a bit of idea why projects are initiated, government may come up with, a very good example is banking regulations comes in, and banks may need to change the way they are working. So what that does is that the government organization then have to adjust and initiate a project to bring about that change within the organization. Banks are very known to have that kind of thing. These are some of the reasons that the project can be initiated, but these definitely not the only one. So just to give you guys a bit of an idea why the projects are initiated. Can you think of an example of a project? So I've given you. So let's. I'm happy if you guys want to unmute yourself or you want to put it in the chat. Let's see what do you guys think about. Give me an example of a project. New software development is one big example. So a lot of people who are representing IT industry, they would know whenever there's a new software development is done, that's basically a project. Data center relocation is another good example of the projects. Modifying business process to improve efficiency, and this is across the board. This is not any specific to any particular industry. A lot of organizations go through restructure and business process transformation to improve their efficiency. So there are a lot of names used for it, but that's how it is. So that could be a project. They use a project. Constructing a building, that's a very good one. Somebody mentioned about green line transit. I'm guessing that's a project somewhere in the globe. I've got audience from the globe, so I'm not sure which country it is, but constructing a bridge and motorway. So I was in a session and somebody asked me, we build bridges all the time, we build motorways all the time, so why it is a project, why it is a unique? The reason for that is no project is unique, no project is similar, identical in fact. Is because the environment the project is done. So you may build a bridge, let's say in America, and you may want to replicate that success in any third world country or somewhere else. The environment will be different. The organizational environment, the cultural impact would be different. The challenges for that project will be totally different, even though the two projects are similar. So a lot of organizations around the world, what they do is they hire the companies that have done similar kind of thing. But there's no surety that the project, especially the mega projects, and when we talk about mega project, we're talking about $1 billion and over projects. There's no surety that they will be successfully, replicated across different countries or different regions. So that's one of the reasons. That's what makes projects very unique and complex as well. Develop a new drug is also a project. So COVID-19 vaccine is a very good example. A lot of organizations are working through it to see, countries are working through it to see how they can do it. Exploration of oil and gas in the region, absolutely critical. Organizations and countries globally are really into exploring oil and gas, and also the alternative for carbon emission, and to basically offset the greenhouse impact. So these are some examples. You can think of a lot of examples within your area, and I'll give you an opportunity for you to ask questions if you've got, see if I can respond to them. So what is project management? So we talked about project, we talked about why projects are initiated. So what is project management? Project management, in a very simple term, is an organized and structured approach to doing something. That's what the project management. So when you take a structured, organized approach, and I'm going to talk about some of the methodologies that we have, that's how it is. You get the work done quicker and cost effectively. So money is the most financial are a very key factor in delivering projects in most of the cases, not all the cases. Then I'll give you some example. Organizations, when they want to bring a change, when they want to implement project, they want to make sure that they do it quickly and cost effectively, and no one wants to spend more money than they have or don't want to go over budget. So that's where the project management comes in picture. The key object of the project management is to plan and execute the project with improved accuracy. And I'll tell you what it means of scope, time, and cost. For people who are not familiar with project management, there are three constraints that projects are around the globe are dealt with. They're basically dealt with three main constraints. That's scope, budget, and schedule. So any work that you do, and that's in our general life as well, any work that you want to do or anything that you want to do, you have a constraint of a budget that you have for that piece of work. You have a constraint of how quickly you want to do it, whether you want to do it in 1 month or 2 months, and the amount of work that you want to do it. So I'll give you an example of buying a car. So a lot of people go and buy a car. When they decide about buying a car, what they do is they think about it. Okay, what type or model of the car I want? What color do I need? Is it blue, green, orange? That's something in your mind. You may not know it, but you're basically you're building a project. You're building a requirement for yourself to buy a car. And then you decide, okay, once you've decided on what car you want to buy, what model you want to buy, you start thinking about whether you have the money for it or not. So that's your budget. That's what project budget is. And that's how organizations work as well. When they think of something doing it, they at the same time they think, okay, hang on a second, we want to do this, but do we have the money for this or not? Going back to your car example, let's say you want to buy a BMW. And you look at your budget, you say, oh, hang on a second, BMW is, I can't buy BMW, but you know what? I probably would buy Honda Civic. I can't think of any other car at the moment, or Toyota. It's a very popular car around the world, or Toyota. And then you look at your budget. So you basically refine or adjust your cost according to scope according to your budget. And then the last thing is the time constraint. When do you want it? If your need is urgent, and if you go to a reseller and the shop says, you know what, BMW is available now, but Toyota is available after 2 months. It depends on what your need is, how quickly you want it. And that's exactly how organizations function. If their need is urgent, they will probably, finance will become less significant factor in gaining the business. So that's something you have to consider. In a nutshell, project management helps organizations execute projects successfully. Now, there are a number of approaches to project management. I'm going to touch three main approaches. But before I do that, I just want to give you a holistic picture of projects. So we talked about scope, cost, and budget. Project management is much bigger than that. It also involves the whole constraint involved. Why do you have a constraint around a project? The constraint is there because you're trying to deliver a product of a certain quality. So you have a constraint. So if your customer comes to you, say, I need you to deliver such and such product with such and such specification, and this is the money that I have for you. and give me this. And you look at it, you plan it, you schedule it, you resource, and you find out, now hang on a second, this is not something I can do. I can give a quality, probably what's been asked for, probably a little bit lower quality within the budget. So either I increase my budget, or I ask client to reduce the quality or specs that they're looking for. And that's where the constraints comes in. The whole idea of the constraints, which are also called triple constraints, is that you keep the quality static by basically using these three constraints as a variable. So changing a scope of a project will definitely impact budget and cost, budget and schedule. Changing schedule will impact, most probably will impact cost and the scope. And similarly for the cost, schedule, if you change the schedule, it will you have to either adjust the scope or the cost. The idea is to keep the quality static or quality at a desired level by changing these three constraints. That's in a nutshell. The other thing is you also have to take into consideration the risk involved in delivering or keeping that quality. So as a project manager, you have to consider the risks involved in delivering that product. So that's something to think about it. I run a principle of project management course. We go into detail about these things, how that is done, how you manage risk. So I'll give you some details about it. So hopefully you can join that as well. There are three main methodology of project management that are at the moment used globally. The first one is PMBOK, or the Project Management Body of Knowledge. Now, PMI, or a Project Management Institute, the premier project management body, it came up with the standards for project delivery way back in 1996, and they released the first PMBOK, which is a guide. PMBOK is Project Management Book of Knowledge Guide. Projects have been done, we may not know it, we may not have realized that projects have been done for about millions of years. Greeks were known to do, we know Egyptian, we know Egyptian from pyramids, we know Greeks from their architectural buildings and construction. Those were all projects of their time. In 1996, project management body in US based, they came up with this guide. They said, oh, hang on a second, we need to formalize how we deliver project across the globe. And contrary to the popular belief, project management is not really IT specific. And this is something that's really important. I would like my audience to understand that a lot of organizations, a lot of people think that project management is only IT specific. It's not, in fact. In fact, the project management, the start of the project management is construction and civil and defense industry. If you think of the terminology, most of the terminology that are used in project management, like planning, strategy, risk, can you think of any industry that uses these things very frequently? If you take the project management aside, can you guys think of an industry? Please, by all means, if you want to speak up or if you want to put it in the chat, let's see. Give me an idea of the industry where you think they use these terminologies: strategy, planning, risk, analysis, management. Where do you think which industries are used to this one? These are all defense industry terminology. So if you look at defense, they use these terminologies. So project management is basically an offshoot of what defense used to do, which then became de facto standard for construction and civil industry. So we now use strategy and planning very frequently, but it basically came from defense industry. Coming back to PMI, PMBOK, it is also called traditional or waterfall approach, and the reason for that is it is also called waterfall because it is a predictive model. So it is more suitable for projects where you know what the scope is, you know what the end goal is. So I gave you an example of a construction or even building a bridge. So you know you want to build a bridge, so you know exactly how you want to do it. There are a certain amount of funds available to you. You came up with the specs and so on and so forth. So how it works is you have a scope, you have a requirement, you convert that into a scope statement or a scope document that you want to adhere to as part of your project objective. Excuse me. And then you plan to achieve that. Once you've done planning, and then you go and execute the project task. Now that's a traditional model. And traditional models are very, if I give you an example, go back to defense industry. If you're building an airplane, you want to build an a plane that is reliable. So you want to go through this. You want to make sure your planning is perfect. You really want to make sure your scope is clear. What kind of an airplane you want? What, whether it's low flying, high spec, stealth, no stealth. These are all the things that you have a very clear picture of how your end product would look like. And this is where the traditional approaches will work. Holistically, in a project management body of knowledge, it is defined, the projects, they are confined within 10 knowledge areas. So there's a scope management, and then there's a schedule management and the cost management. We talked about these triple constraints. But then comes the resource management. So you know what your scope is, you know what your schedule is, you know what your budget is. But then how do you go about executing it? So you need to gather resources, whether it's material or human resources. So that's called resource management. Then you need to look at the quality. So there's a concept of quality management within PMBOK as well, that you have to manage that as well as a project manager. And we're looking at this from a perspective of a project manager. So when I'm explaining this, I would like you guys to think that you are a project manager. Then we look into the risk management. If there are risks in achieving a project, and what are those risks, and how we go about eliminating or minimizing the impact of the risk. One thing I would like you guys to remember, just a tip: there's no such thing as no risk. There's always a risk in anything you do, whether it can be a low risk, but there's no such thing in the world which is no risk, because everything has a risk. So this is a tip for you guys, especially for the guys who are preparing for certification exam. Then we have procurement. There's a big focus on stakeholder management. I always say that the projects are delivered by the people for the people, and project manager job is to build relationship with the stakeholders. And I'm going to go a little bit of some of the techniques that they use. And the communication management, absolutely key. How much, the amount of time that project managers spend on communication is around 85 to 90%. That's a journal research which says, and that's the amount of time a project manager spends. So the PMBOK, or the traditional concept, is that a project manager uses all these techniques and skills to deliver a project. So it goes through a project life cycle of initiation, planning, execution, and closing, which is very key. And that's one of the approach that you use. By the way, for people who are interested in project management certification exam from PMI, which is PMP, Project Management Professional, very, very famous globally, I do conduct PMP Professional Certification exam trainings as well. By all means, if you're interested in, drop me an email. Yasser can give you an email in the chat. I'm scheduling a virtual session very soon, in the next couple of months. So if you're interested, by all means, let me know. I'm more than happy to help. Okay, moving on to the second one. I'll keep the third, so, which is Prince. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the concept of Prince. Prince is basically project in control environment. PMBOK is very US focused, whereas Prince is UK focused. In fact, Prince was started way back by the British government for effective. And again, the approach of the Prince is pretty much similar to PMBOK. It's predictive. It's very good and thorough for mega projects, similar to project manage PMBOK. And the only difference is I shouldn't say the only difference, but the key difference between the two is where PMBOK focuses on 10 knowledge areas. I talked about that. Prince 2 is focused on more process driven rather than knowledge area. It's 7 processes. And it is basically a de facto standard for US government, widely used across the Commonwealth countries as well. There are there are a lot of pros and cons for both of them, but there's no perfect method of doing or approach, for one simple reason, that it depends on the environment that you are working on, the organization you're working on. So, and that's why it is key to understand that you pick up the methodology that suits your organization. But the important thing to consider is, and especially this is very key, is that as an organization, you want to stick to a particular methodology, because, I'll explain to you, there's a hybrid model as well, but But the key message that I want to, you don't want to have a mishmash of multiple methodologies, because then what it does is that it confuses your project management team, and they're not sure what to do. So that's a bit of idea. The last one I'm going to touch base on Agile, and I'm sure a lot of people who are from IT in the session will be very happy to hear that. Agile is the buzzword, if I may say, these days. It is an iterative approach to managing software development, and it's very important that that we understand that these organizations are very focused on agile project delivery. Agile doesn't work everywhere. Agile is it was developed especially for IT industry for software development. This is and I'm sure people from IT can relate to it, is that if there are feature changes in anything, they can Agile is very good when it comes to it. So what it does is they work in sprints, usually 2-week sprints. They call it sprints. They develop a portion of the full project, get it reviewed, get it approved, and then move on to it. So it's basically, it's also called adaptive or iterative. So they change the scope. So Agile is very good when it comes to small projects or software development project where the scope behind final product is not known. So what I mean by that is, let's assume Apple is releasing a new iPhone. Now, I'm not sure how most of the countries work when it comes to mobile plans, but in Australia, telco offers a mobile plan, like $30 plan on a new iPhone. For them to be ready for a new iPhone with their plans is they go through this agile software delivery, and they wait probably till the end of the iPhone launch so that they can tweak the product to match the hardware. And that's pretty normal. I don't know if that's happening in a lot of countries around the world as well, but I'm not sure. I've got a bit of experience in telco as well. The disadvantage of Agile, and I want to touch on disadvantage of the Agile, is that planning is very less accurate. So in Agile, because it's a continuous, you can't really plan for holistically. You have to plan on for an interval, basically 2 weeks or 4 weeks. The other thing is that Agile is very reliant on the skill of the resources available. So while in project, especially in mega projects, the resources come and go. In Agile, you have to have kind of a dedicated team to work with you. For simple reason, if you're working on a feature and somebody leaves, so for other person to come in and pick up the pieces from where the previous person left, it's very hard, and it basically defeats the purpose of the agility in project delivery. So there's a concept of there's a concept of, I would say, perception of not having good documentation Agile. That creates a lot of problem as well. Project management is based on methodology and proper processes. You don't have to have rigorous process, but you have to have rigor with the right kind of a governance. So this is few things. The final thing I want to mention about Agile project management is, and I'm sure a lot of people who are from IT industry can relate to it, the end product may not be what the initial product you have planned or perceived to achieve, and this is because there's so much changes in iteration according to to the environment, whether the change in specs. So people come and say, okay, let's change it. I don't want this feature. Can you move this button here? Can you move this feature here? And it just basically keeps changing. So and that's where the challenge with the agile project management is. Okay, sorry. Got a question before I was going to ask. So let's take a question. I think I've got a question. Kindly elaborate particular reason, if any, as why PMBOK is preferred in US and Prince2 in the UK. Do you see it being? So thank you very much for the question, Pod. There's no particular reason. It's just PMBOK initiated in US. It's a PMI is Pennsylvania-based organization, and they came out. And I can only think of probably British-US arch rivalry in that case. So there's no right or wrong approach methodology. A lot of organizations in US also use Prince2, but predominantly United States organizations use PMI. That's what it is. There's a lot of focus on bringing agile as well because of software development. And it's just the environment, it's just the culture. Prince2 is probably more process oriented. So I think people tend to find it, especially Commonwealth countries tend to find it a little bit easier. I have to say that Prince2 is also a preference in the public sector, just because it's a little bit easy compared to PMI. PMI certification is very hard to get. It requires a lot of rigor, it requires a lot of understanding and knowledge, it requires a lot of experience, whereas Prince2 is pretty much very easy. So if I have to pick in terms of rigor and you know, the brand value, if you ask me, I would go with PMBOK. Not to say that's my personal opinion. That's not probably correct for a lot of people as well. Like I said, there's a question about Rabia. Thank you very much, about the disadvantage of Prince2. There's no disadvantage. It all depends on how your organization is geared to it. So let me give you an example of both Prince2 and PMBOK. They are waterfall-based predictive approaches. Probably PMBOK is very heavy documented, so it's very focused on heavy documentation. But I have to say that January 2021, PMBOK 7 is being released, and I have been involved in a lot of development of that as well. It's basically changing. It's changing. The focus is changing from heavy documentation to process and people interaction and entrepreneurship rather than process. So I think PMBOK has also realized over a period of time that it's time to change. It's been there like this for the last 3 years. But needless to say, there's no right or wrong. Like I said, your organization has to adapt a certain methodology. If you are a small organization, if you represent a small organization, when I say small organization, maybe less than 5,000 people, I would suggest probably Prince2 to go. And well, you have to take into consideration how big is your project management force as well. So if you have, out of 5,000, you have 1,000 project managers, then probably, PMBOK, because then it's very rigor, it's very thorough. It has a lot of probably less flexibility than Prince, but it has a lot of rigor in it. So a lot of mega projects. To give you an idea, all mega projects across the world use PMBOK. That's how it is, mostly. I hope I answered your question. But let's talk about project management. So we are all here because we want to learn about the project management, but who delivers the project? It's project manager who delivers the project. In very simple words, project manager is the person who leads the project and makes sure it is delivered. So it goes through whichever methodology you're using, and contrary to popular belief, project manager doesn't need to be very technical, but the person needs to be very smart and analytical and probably forward thinking. So and be flexible about it. So, and we're going to talk about some of the skills that project managers, especially soft skills that project managers require. They own the project. Once you're assigned as a project manager, you own the project. You will have to manage the project, right? It is the responsibility of project managers to ensure that the project objectives align with overall organizational strategy and objective, right? That's the key. There's no point in doing a project which doesn't give a benefit. If you remember, we talked about it, that projects needs to give some business value. If the projects are not bringing any revenue, any value for the business, why do a project? So it is the responsibility of project manager once the project is assigned. The other key responsibility of project manager is to manage the change in the project. We talked about it, how scope change, how in Agile is an approach where it will change, but in predictive models like waterfall approaches like PMBOK and Prince2, change is there. Change is inevitable. We know change is going to happen, right? But how you manage the change. So if you're managing change, and when we talk about managing change, I don't want to spend too much time on it. There's a whole change management concept of it. So you don't go, if you have a project, let's say you're buying a car. Let me give you an example. Go back to buying a car. If you're buying you don't just suddenly change your mind. Okay, I'm not going to buy a BMW. I'm going to go and buy Audi, not knowing how much it's going to cost. So if you're changing your mind, you have to see what is the impact. So that's where the change management comes in. The other key role of the project manager is the communicator. can't stress enough how much communication is critical and important for a project manager. It's just absolutely critical. Managing risk is another thing. Managing the resources is another thing. So let me just go through quickly. I'm just conscious of the time. I know people might have to go. Let's talk about the project manager skills. Research says a project manager spends about 85 to 90% time in communication. Now that could be verbal communication, that could be written communication, that could be a corridor chat, could be virtual, but that's a communication. Good communication is making sure that the right message is delivered to the right audience at the right time. That's the key to the communication. Effective communication is not just about sending the message, it's making sure that the message has been delivered, understood, and acknowledged by the receiver. And I've seen, I've been in industry for, I mentioned to you, about 27 years, and I've seen very good, capable, technically sound project managers fail just because their communication skills were not where the stakeholders are. If you cannot communicate the status of a project in a way that the stakeholders wants to hear, in a way, and I'm not saying incorrect, and say the way the manager wants to see the status, it's no use. If you can't communicate, it's just no use doing a project, because you're basically defeating the purpose. Organization doesn't know where the project is. You can't tell them how, what the actual status of the project is. So your communication has to be really good. So if you're really thinking of becoming a project manager, I can't stress enough how much you need to concentrate on is build your stakeholder skills, communication skills. Listen to your stakeholders. Listening to them is very important. Understand what is being said and what is being asked of you. There's no point in sending a lot of reports and statuses if that's not what they're looking for. If they're looking for one simple piece of response, then that's what you should concentrate on. So remember, right information for the right audience at the right time. That's the key, right? So the other thing is leadership. Project leadership. Let me differentiate between leadership and management. So, and there's a lot of debate going on in the industry these days about the change of the terminology from project management to project leader, and I think that's probably going to happen in the next few years as well. The big difference between leadership and management is, leader commands respect, whereas manager demands it, right? Leader shows you how to do it rather than tells you what to do it. So like I said, projects are delivered by the people for the people, and if you can't work with the people, if you can't manage people, if you can't lead people, you will always struggle. There are many ways of doing a leadership. So, and in a project, just to give you an idea, there's an autocratic way of doing, managing a project where, project manager is all in all. He doesn't want to listen anyone and just takes that role, ownership. Then there's a concept of consensus, somebody who's really willing to listen to everyone and work through it. And then there's a new concept called servant leadership, right? Demonstrate the willingness and ability to help people and work with them. The important thing to understand is, as a project manager, you'll be asked, or you'll be looking at yourself to exhibit these leadership qualities at different times and depending on the scenario. So there's no one right way to do it, but one thing important to consider and remember is that people will be looking up to you as a project manager. Okay, that's the person I need to look at it. What is he or she doing? How is this person leading the project, right? So you need to lead the project to success. And if you are somewhere reluctant, or they have a challenge that your leadership qualities are not where it needs to be, then you're going to struggle with the project, because then everybody's going to do what they want to do. So something to think about it. Decision making, very key. I think I just talked about decision making and negotiation are very good skills, and one of the important skills that you do have. You will have a situation in a project pretty much on a regular basis where you have to negotiate and work with the people. You have resources. Let me give you an example. If you have a resource who's working on your project, and that resource suddenly leaves, what do you do? How do you get another resource? And whatever decisions you make, you have to stand by those decisions. So your decisions have to be very smart. Let me give you an example. Let's assume that you're working on a project and you have a very skilled resource, and resource suddenly falls sick, and not available for next 2 days. So obviously, as a project manager, you're not going to sit and just wait for the resource to come back. You're going to look around for the alternatives. How you're going to get the job done, because you have a schedule. Remember, as a project manager, you have a schedule to meet. So suppose that you find a resource, probably less lower skill resource, can do the job, but will do the job in 3 days. So you have a decision to make whether or you're going to wait for the skilled resource to come back after 2 days, or use this resource to do that work in 3 days, right? So that's kind of a decision. So I'm just saying, so as a decision, you have to make these decisions pretty much on a regular basis, on a daily basis on the projects, how to manage these projects. And team would be looking up to you to make a call, because that's something that's your responsibility. So anyway, just give you then the most important is conflict management. I don't want to go too much into it. I'm just conscious of the time as well. Conflict is inevitable in projects. We are people, we deal with people, everybody has personalities. You will also have conflict with resourcing, scheduling, and everything. And there are a lot of techniques available. But that's something that you have to think about it as well. As a project manager, you would like to build your conflict management skills. And I always say that as a project manager, don't avoid the conflict. So one of the worst things that you can do as a project manager, when you have a problem, you avoid it. Avoiding a conflict is basically a disaster for your project, because that's going to come back and bite you at sometime in the future. So be careful about it. Think about it. There is, I mentioned about the another course that I do. I go in deeper detail, do a lot of interactive exercises on how we manage it, how we do problem solving, how we work around compromising. There's some of the techniques that you can do as part of a conflict management. Okay, let's see what we have now. Let's talk about project lifecycle. Before I go to project lifecycle, is there any question anybody wants to ask? I think I would like to have a.
We do have a question from Farhan. He's asking, what are the agile projects, and is there an example, and why are they complex?
Thanks so much. So thanks, Farhan. Farhan, I can't really think of as such, because agiles are mostly, so any software development project, I can tell you that most of the organizations are using agile. Every project is complex, whether it's whether agile or PMBOK or PIN. So these are the methodologies, these are the approaches that you use to project. So and these are there because project itself is a complex venture, right? So you have to think from organization point of view. Organization that are totally software development organization. I'll give you an example of Apple as an organization. I'm pretty sure most of their work is agile based, and there are a lot of by the way, different methodologies in agile as well. SAFe is one very scaled agile. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with. It's a very popular one that's coming up. So to answer your question, every methodology has its pros and cons. It's just basically you decide as an organization what you want to achieve. If I'm in construction, I'm not going to consider agile because it's not for construction at all. So mostly IT related. Okay. So do we have any other question that we want to?
Yeah, Faisal is asking, isn't being a negotiator a key skill too?
Absolutely, 100%. So I would say, if we need to, like I said, we have a very limited time, but I would like to absolutely negotiation and communication, absolutely key skill. So how you negotiate with the people, how you work with the people. Like I said, projects are delivered by the people, for the people. So you need to make sure the project has some value for the people that they're doing, and you have to keep the people motivated as well. So you're absolutely right, Faisal. Negotiation is a key skill. So thank you. Okay, let's talk about project lifecycle. Before I touch on project lifecycle, I just want to highlight one more thing. This is it's a generic life cycle. Now, the reason I said generic, it is not dependent on any methodology. It's normally usually how the projects are delivered over a period of time. There's always initiation. So, different methodologies may use different wording for starting a project, but it's initiation. I'm just using PMBOK method approach just to make it a little bit easy, because I think it's probably easy to pass on that message. Initiation is where the idea has popped up in somebody's mind, or there's a need, or there's a market need, and they said, okay, hang on a second, we need to come up with a project. So what are we going to do is, here's the scope, here's the budget, this is what we need to do it, let's scope it, we need something. So that's the initiation. So you have a scope, you have a budget, and you have been given a schedule to do it. And this is where, during initiation is where your project manager is assigned. So then comes planning. So once project manager is assigned, what happens? So as a project manager, you get the budget, you get the scope, and you go into the business and you define and plan the project. And planning the project is much bigger than just coming up with the Microsoft schedule. I'm sorry, I'm just using this terminology. There are a lot of other tools also used, but usually very popular one is Microsoft schedule. It's more than that. Yes, it gives you the Gantt chart, does give you a holistic view of the task duration and everything. But planning means you're planning how you're going to manage the scope, how you're going to manage the changes, how you're going to manage the resources, how you're going to manage your risk, and all these things. So it's a pretty extensive thing to do. In fact, the most amount of time a lot of project managers spend is during planning. You get the planning right, you get the job done pretty successfully. Execution. Now, of course, after planning, you've got the initiation, you've started, you've planned for it, now you're going to implement it. The funny thing is, and this is where your agile comes in, execution and planning go side by side, because you're executing, you have planned for something, and you're doing an execution, you're executing a project, and suddenly some change comes in. Somebody said, oh, hang on a second, I don't need a 2-lane highway, I need 4-lane highway, and you go back to the planning. So planning and execution, these pretty much iterative process, and basically key to project delivery. Once you've gone through, once you've executed, then you close the project. One of the biggest mistakes a lot of project managers around the globe do it, and I can make that statement because I've worked with a lot of. They don't concentrate, they don't focus on the project closure. Once the project is delivered, they deliver the product or software, and then they basically wrap up the bag and go on and do some other project. That's a disaster, guys. A good project managers always go through the proper closure, make sure resources are rewarded, recognized, make sure the lesson learned. So lesson learned is very key to project management. And unfortunately, a lot of project managers, and because of the time constraints, because of the pressure, they don't focus on it. And that is something that you have to do it, because your lesson learned will help your future projects to not to make those mistakes. So this is something key that you have to consider. And like I said, there's a limited time today, but there's a whole process of how you do it, how you engage into it, and go through it. Now you will notice that I put a closure, I put an arrow from closure to initiation. So you must be wondering why, once the project is closed, why we are doing initiation. The same life cycle is used for project phases. So you may have a project, you have multiple phases. So I'm trying to think of project. Let's say you're building, constructing a motorway between two major cities. I'll take an example of Australia, Sydney and Melbourne. It's about 1,000 kilometers. So you don't build 1,000 kilometers in one go. What you do is you build in phases. So you probably do 200 kilometers first, and then you plan for 200 kilometers, and then you plan for another 200 meters, and so on and so forth. That's the phases. So once the first phase is complete, you close the project phase, that phase, not the project, that phase, and then go through the lesson learned, use that for the next phase, and so on and so forth. That's why this project life cycle is not only applicable to a single project as a whole big project, but also the project phase, project with the multiple phases. Monitoring and control, that's the key. The whole project environment is managed, monitored, and controlled by project manager, you guys. This is what you do. You keep track of it, you keep track of the risk, you keep track of the budget, you manage scope, you keep track of the scope changes. Pretty much anything that can impact your project, it's your job to make sure that you keep project on the delivery path, so that you don't miss the delivery path. All right. Okay, I thought I'll give you a bit of high-level project steps. What are I'm going to quickly go through them, and I would like to give you guys an opportunity to ask questions as well. Pretty straightforward. You got a project, you assign a project manager. That's pretty much what you do, right? To start with it, the job of a project manager is to assemble team, and it's just not one line. It's, you know, there are multiple phases in it. How you go, who do you want to assign, or whether you need a quality assurance person, you need a risk manager, you know, what SMEs, and so on and so forth. So, but that's in general. Then you define project scope, you know, and identify constraints. I think we talked about it. What are the three main constraints? But you also look at it, what other main constraints are, you know, on top of scope, budget, and schedule. You may have a constraint to resourcing constraint. You may not have the resource available for you to do the work. So you have to negotiate, and this is where I think Faisal asked a question about negotiation. Apologies if I got the name wrong. You look at the dependencies. Some of the, especially in projectized organization, there are different type of organization, metrics, functional, metrics, and high metrics, and there's a concept of projectized organization where the entire organization is built on projects and they do nothing but projects. In those environments, there in organization, there are a lot of dependency between the projects. So if you're doing one project, so maybe I gave you an example of the phases of the project that could be considered as phase one. Phase two is dependent on phase one completing. So these are the dependencies. So there could be internal, external dependencies, and few other things. Risk, you have to take into consideration of the risk. What are the risks? How you're going to manage the risk as a project manager. Is it something manageable? Is it something that you can really work through, or is something that you can ignore? Like I said, there's no such thing as zero risk. There's always a low risk, and it's how you impact it. And risks are measured through impact into probability. I'm sure a lot of you already know, but that's how we do it. You develop a project plan. We talked about it. You know, schedule is one part of the project plan, but basically you look at the holistic plan, how you're going to approach the project, how you're going to build it, how you're going to achieve your end goal. And then you execute the project, right? Now, I want to highlight a few things. Executing the project means managing the stakeholders and managing communication. I'm not saying these are the only steps that you did. I'm just highlighting at a high level what you guys need to do as a project manager. But these are the key ones. You have to manage your stakeholders. If you don't manage your stakeholders, if you don't deliver what your stakeholders want, what your end user want, then there's no point in doing the project. The project has to deliver a value to your stakeholders. If it's not, then people will never do a project. And then there's a project closure, which is releasing team and doing lesson learned. So these are the high level steps. I'll definitely send out the deck to all of you guys so you can use it. In summary, just to summarize what we have covered, we talked about what is project management and what is a project and why projects are initiated. We talked about the life cycle that project goes through, and key task involved in project during life cycle, and we talked about who the project manager is.